welcome to Media7. I'm Russell Brown. Responses to the most recent round of national crime statistics for calendar 2009 were familiar enough. Concern about a rising crime rate. This time, it's actually true. The 3.5% jump in overall offences per capita is the first increase since 2002 and the biggest in many years. The 65 recorded murders was the highest total in a decade and up a quarter on 2008. Police believe changes in reporting trends, and especially in family violence, are still chiefly responsible for the 8% rise in recorded violent offences. But our overall crime rate remains lower than it was in 2000 and much lower than in 1990 when it peaked. And yet, in a trend first noted by researcher Judy McGregor, the proportion of news dedicated to crime has steadily increased. And a good part of that coverage has involved our first guest tonight. Jose Barbosa introduces Garth McVicar.
For the past 9 years, journalists have been really lucky. Every time they've needed someone to tell us that the justice system is failing and is soft on criminals, they've been able to rely on one man.
Hi, I'm Garth McVicar. I'm a cocky from Hawke's Bay. I'm a cocky with a passion. On the farm, we quickly recognise and isolate problem animals. The criminal justice system has the ability to do the same.
Garth is the founder and spokesperson for the Sensible Sentencing Trust, a volunteer organisation that advocates for justice law reform. In a nutshell, they want tougher sentencing for violent crime and the removal of parole for repeat offenders. The Trust grew out of support for Mark Middleton, who was convicted in 1999 after making threats against his daughter's killer. In the same year, just under 92% of the public agreed, via a national referendum, that there should be greater emphasis on the needs of victims and minimum sentences and hard labour for serious violent offenders. If Garth's goal is to get the Trust wider exposure, he's been extraordinarily successful.
I've seen you on the what's the name on
On the paper or the TV or
TV.
News shows seem to be able to whistle him up at a moment's notice, and he's everywhere.
There's a little referee of criminals coming up through the system.
Garth has a good old Kiwi bloke manner which helps endear him to the general public. I mean, who's easier to understand? Garth, who has no expertise in criminology?
Our violent crime is the worst this country has ever seen, and there is nothing happening in legislation that will turn that around yet.
Or a psychologist who has actually worked with violent offenders?
Up to best practice for the last 10 years, we've shown good results. We now have 2 programs.
Garth has been able to tap into a sense held by a portion of the public, that in the old days the world was safer. It's a feeling that rehabilitation is simple mollycoddling. It's a belief that persists no matter how many facts you can throw at it.
The expert in a moment is going to tell us that 80% of people are rehabilitated. In fact, it's 80% and going up.
Rehabilitation, as I've said, is not working. I don't care what the experts say. This is common sense, grassroots stuff. Rehabilitation is not working under our present justice system.
Although Garth likes to present himself as a simple cowcocky, he's a pretty slick operator. When he finds a good phrase, he latches onto it.
Rehabilitation is a figment of some bygone era. Now, rehabilitation is a figment of the imagination. Our Minister of Warm Fuzzies, as we've gone down that warm fuzzy model, it's just a warm fuzzy document. We've adopted this warm fuzzy justice system.
His message is that the justice system is out of control, leaving us at the mercy of an army of murderers.
Is this really where you want this country to be? One of the most violent countries in the Western world now?
It's a message that most media seem only too happy to repeat.
His orgy of murder.
When will it stop the senseless killings, the random shootings, the violent crime?
And even if opposing views are aired,
By continually highlighting the crimes against these victims and the way victims feel about that, is that they don't allow them then to rebuild some sense of future and empowerment and moving forward.
it seems that no one can resist the old Kiwi battler charm for long.
Could I suggest that what you're about is protection? Protection for society.
I hope that message is coming through loud and clear. That's what we're all about, yeah.
And if our media is mesmerised by Garth, why fight it? Give him his own bloody show.
Jose Barbosa there, transfixed he was. And with me now is Garth McVicar, spokesperson for the Sensible Sentencing Trust. Welcome, Garth.
Russell, hiya.
Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
As we've just noted, your voice has been the dominant one in the media on crime and punishment for the last 10 years. How do you do it?
I think possibly you need to go a little bit further back in that and see what, reasons that we got started and whatnot. I think before we started, the dominant voice was driven by the establishment, if you want. Some of the lawyers, the media would go to a lawyer outside at a trial and say, ask for an opinion, and they would say, well, their client was on drugs or on alcohol or whatever, and gradually that became the status quo, the agenda, and there wasn't any balance to that. And it wasn't until I got involved with Mark Middleton that we realised just how out of kilter the thing was. And as I got involved with more victims, we decided that we needed to actually do something about bringing a balance to that.
See, I think that's one of the things that some people object to when they see you on screen pronouncing on the law. Yep. Their belief is that if you want someone to comment on the law, you get a lawyer.
Yeah, absolutely. And that had happened from the last 30-odd years. That is what had happened. I mean, I'm certainly not saying I've got it right. One of the things that caught me by surprise, I suppose, was the following that it had. It was originally just my wife and I standing up for something we believed in. And it just took off like Topsy and is continuing to grow.
And you certainly have stood up. What sort of advice or media training have you taken along the way?
I haven't had any media training at all. So you asked me what the secret is. Look, there's no secret. We just stand up for what we believe, call it the way we see it.
Now, I've been looking at your website through the week, which is a very full website. There's a lot there. I was looking back at your press statements from the time you started, from 2001, and it did strike me that the tone of them has changed. They used to be much more constructive. Now, to be honest, they're abusive. You call perfectly decent people criminals and enablers, including people working on prisoner rehabilitation. Why has that happened? And do you really think that helps?
I call people criminals, yes. Other than the criminals themselves?
No, you call policymakers criminals?
Oh, yeah, I say who are the real criminals? The people who are committing the crime? Or the policymakers?
How can we have a sensible discussion when you're calling people criminals and enablers because they don't agree with you?
Well, because I think when you look at legislation that has been passed, there's no doubt that it has an agenda that I don't particularly agree with, and the members of Sensible Sentencing Trust don't agree with.
You complained to the BSA about last month's Crime and Punishment documentary.
Yep.
I thought that was a pretty intelligent and interesting documentary. What was your problem with it?
There was a number of issues there. They talked about, prisons, factories of crime or something like that, and maybe not the exact words. They portrayed what was happening in the US as not the way to go. They portrayed Finland as the role model.
Which you've been to twice and have been quite positive about.
Sorry?
You've been to Finland twice and have been quite positive about it.
Yes, some of the things there we definitely could learn by, yeah. But there were selective parts of that documentary which we didn't agree with, and I mean, I've never ever put in.
You can't make a broadcasting standards complaint purely because you don't agree with the ideas. It just seems to me that it's difficult to have a debate, Garth.
Have you read the complaint?
No, I haven't. I've read what you've written about it and said about it.
Okay. We actually isolated the issues we were complaining about, and we were waiting for a response on that to see whether that's got any traction or not. First time I've made a complaint on any issue at all.
Getting back to tone, I find something of an irony in the fact that the Trust got rolling with the case of Mark Middleton, someone who was convicted of threatening to kill and mutilate another person. That category, threats and intimidation, is, according to the police themselves, almost the sole cause of the increase in the violent crime statistics. So you supported a man who threatened to kill someone and then used those very statistics to demonstrate that violent crime was rising. Do you not see an irony there? I kind of wonder sometimes, Garth, what world you would like to live in.
Yeah, I'd like to live in a world a lot safer than what New Zealand currently is, with a lot less crime. But you brought up the Middleton case, and if you're going to bring that up, then you need to look back further to what the offence was. Don't go too much into the detail there. But I've got 4 daughters, and if anything happened like to one of my daughters, like happened to young Carla Cardno, then I'd be saying the same thing. There was no way Middleton could carry. There was no way Middleton could carry out that threat at all. At all. He was. Daly was in prison at the time, so he couldn't carry out the threat.
Can I also ask you about your statements in the press about Bruce Emery? The convicted killer Bruce Emery. You appeared to express sympathy for him, and I think there were people who may have been sympathetic with you who were appalled by that. He killed someone's child. Can you explain why you were sympathetic towards him?
Absolutely. We had focused up until then on violent crime, the level of violent crime. What we were trying to do, and successfully I believe, is to take the debate into the entry-level crime. The countries that are starting to successfully win the battle are dealing with entry-level crime quite seriously. And I'm talking graffiti, those type of things. In our hometown, you had a judge who sent a young offender away for 28 days for doing graffiti because he'd got sick of it. The judge had got sick of it.
But the penalty for doing graffiti should not be death.
What we were doing, no, definitely. And what we were doing was taking the debate into that area, and it's worked extremely well.
Can I quote you from your website? You said, in this case, it was felt by many that the victim's conduct substantially mitigated the offender's conduct. Would you be able to say that to P. Hema Cameron's parents?
Hema Cameron, that wasn't the first time Hema Cameron had committed those type of offences.
So, Garth, basically what that says is that the little shit had it coming. And I don't see any other way to read that. And, you know, this is why I'm on at you about your tone.
No, that's cool. I mean, what we did there was to take the debate into that area of entry-level crime. It's been looked at seriously now. Even the government's starting to look at entry-level crime. How do we actually... in the past, we've talked about the causes of crime, but we haven't seriously done anything about it. Now we are seriously looking at the entry-level crime.
And in the process, you're accusing someone who chased and killed a child.
Oh, look, we can talk about that all night, but if ultimately you get a debate going in that area, then the ends justify the means.
I would really love to carry this on, Garth, and we might have to do it another time, but we are out of time for this segment of the show, so thank you for coming on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Garth McVicar, thank you. After the break, a critic and an editor.